Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riff? Talking about our favorite albums featuring our favorite riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson, and with me, as always, are my friends in music, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. I swear to God, we're going to do this right this time. We have attempted to record this multiple times. It took a whole Chicago trip.
3 states,
and we're finally going to do it. If this doesn't work, then f*** it. But I'm pretty. I have faith in this. This is going to work, I think.
Blind faith. That's what you got to grow on. That's the only thing.
Just blind faith and ambition, I guess. This is my mic didn't work before we started this. I couldn't figure out the video feed. But I alluded to Trip. You guys came up to Chicago. You guys visited me. We hung out. We did some stuff.
Yep.
Did you guys have a good time?
Terrible time. Absolutely awful.
It was pretty awful.
Just misery the entire time. Like having bamboo shoots pushed under my nail beds. It was absolutely the worst time I've ever had in my life. It was great.
Well, we did shoot bamboo shoots under your nails, so that might be why it felt that way.
It was fun. I enjoyed that part of the trip, actually, personally. But
it's like deep dish, bamboo shoots, same night, perfect.
Yeah, we had deep dish the first night. Yep. You'd saved yourself. You were cleaned out, ready for pizza. I took you to Lou Malnati's for the first time. Thoughts, concerns?
It's by far my favorite of the 3 that I've had.
We had Giordano's the first time you came up here, or at least the first time we came up here together. Mm-hmm. We saw Black Sabbath, like the reunion shows at the United Center, and we hadn't eaten all day and just went to Giordano's, and I witnessed a man weep tears. And then both of you guys came up the next time. We had pizza at least like that together. Mm-hmm. And we got Pequods, which is good. I think it's a little bit more doughy than I would like. It's a little bit more bread to sauce ratio, but I would say as far as like regional chain pizzas, Lou Malnati's is probably my favorite for sure.
It's no Papa John's, but it's pretty good. You know, they got Shaq.
Is that right, Swindle? As a current resident of Louisville, with the ivory tower that Papa John's is looking down on the city, can you weigh in on this debate?
Well, it's kind of interesting because the Yum Corporation, which is Pizza Hut, also is in Louisville.
That's right. Damn.
Yeah. So we have it's like the 2 towers. I think that's what the Lord of the Rings book is about. Is that's right. Papa John's.
Jesus
and Pizza
Christ!
Hut.
It already starts
duking it out, nipping at the ankles of Papa John.
Shaq's just one of those giant tree critters, just like mowing through fucking Louisville.
I wish somebody would nip at Papa John's ankles, bite them right off.
It could be you. You could be that lucky guy.
It could
I've
be.
eaten 36 pizzas in 3 days.
You might.
Oh.
So much pain behind those eyes.
Just he's shivering. I know the feeling. Just like, oh,
he is the greasiest. Like that post firing and that video, like just pure grease. I don't know what it was. He looked just so disheveled.
It's like that. It's like the teary-eyed meme. It's just that over and over. Yeah. It's just him, just bloodshot eyes, bad bit of pomade in his hair. Just like, it's terrible.
He deserved it.
Yeah, he did. You heard it here first. I said. So we got pizza. We stayed in Little Sweden. We stayed in Andersonville. at this Airbnb where we attempted to record this for the first time.
Yes.
But the Airbnb did not have Wi-Fi. I did not read that in the bio of the Airbnb because
hilarious.
I just figured that would be a thing included, which is also confusing because we watched shit all the nights we were there on a Roku. So like, how does that work? So maybe I was getting hustled, but
there was some hustling going on there.
Oh yeah,
it's 2024.
We walked around though. We got some had breakfast at a nice little Swedish diner up the street.
No fish. Real upset about that. None of those little red fish. I was bummed out.
I think out of all the things we could have got on the menu, we probably got the most traditional breakfast a person could get.
Just like omelets and breakfast specials. And
that's it.
That's it. I always get the same thing when I go to that's it. 2 egg, potato, meat, done. Coffee, blow it all out directly after.
I don't want to talk about that either.
Oh yeah, there were some.
There was a racket going on with that Airbnb with the toilet paper.
Dude, oh yeah, single
one
ply. Oh, oof. The three of us together.
And only 2 rolls.
2 rolls. Yeah. It was about to be dire straits, some Lord of the Flies type shit. Had we not stopped by a Walgreens or whatever to pick up some of the good stuff.
That is the most I've ever spent on toilet paper in my life, and I am okay with it.
Yeah. Is it John Panette? You don't skimp on toilet paper. It's the one thing. You just you can forego most things, but you don't skimp on good toilet paper. Yeah, 3 of us sharing one bathroom is not a good time, but we made it work. We were kind of walking around the neighborhood. We hung out at a dive bar. But then we got to see some other good stuff. We went to some record stores, of course. Avondale, went to Meteor Gym. You guys finally got to peruse the inventory of perhaps one of my favorite record stores in the city.
Walking down into what I can only describe as a dungeon is fantastic. But the minute you open, it's like you're literally it's dead silent outside. You can't hear anything. The minute you crack that door, it's like, all right, your senses better be prepared.
Oh yeah.
If you can't handle that shit when you walk in there, it's going to be a nightmare for you. Felt just like home.
They had the DJ going at the time. It was literally just the 4 of us, Mikhail, the owner, and a DJ. It's just blaring brutal death metal the entire time. I picked up some good stuff. I got the Upon Stone EP.
I grabbed a copy of Suffocation's EP from '98 called Despise the Sun.
Oh yeah.
One of the Relapse repressings. Yeah. That was one of the things on my list.
Cool. Yeah, and then we went up the street because you could literally go a few blocks up to Bucket of Blood. Swindle got like a bunch of books. Did you get any movies or anything, or was it just
books?
Books.
Just
zines?
nerd shit.
Hell yeah.
Just
that's the store for it.
Anyone in particular that you were stoked to get?
I didn't know what any of them were about, but I got one of them because the cover of it is fucking insane. I think it's called like Walking Instructions or Walking Directions was the name of it. And then I got a different book that was about it's like indigenous horror short stories. And that looked pretty cool.
Tight. The one other thing I forgot to mention that we did, we went to Woolly Mammoth. That place was fucking wild.
Yeah. Man, there is some legit wild shit in there. To tie into our acid bath episode, there was a piece of Gacy artwork in there.
You mentioned there was so much in there, but it's such a small storefront. Yeah. And I felt like I could have sat in there for like hours just looking through all of this shit. Because it's a lot. There are a lot of big shit. Like there's a whole ass giraffe head just as soon as you walk in the door, but ass giraffe. But then there's all the little stuff that you could just like, oh, what is this? Oh, that's crazy. Like, teeth, little like film snippets of, x-rayed teeth.
Yep.
Yeah, they had the Gacy artwork in there.
Parts of Ed Gein's Tombstone.
Yeah. What was they had the lady, there was an original picture of what's her face?
Lady.
Oh, Elizabeth Bathory.
Yeah, that was wild.
No, not Elizabeth Bathory. Cancel that. It was the woman that Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Lizzie
the band.
Borden. There are no photos of Elizabeth Bathory.
Named after the band.
Yeah, named exactly after the band. The the 80s black metal band. That's what she's named after.
The worst part of the whole trip was I left my fucking blankie.
Was it the worst part? I was great. I think it's awesome. I got a couple of extra layers. Hey man, what you leave here is mine.
I slept in that bed right behind you.
That's true. You were here in this room. I could still smell you.
And it ain't pleasant.
So we couldn't film this episode in Andersonville. So we tried to film it back here at my house in the burbs, which also I fucked up. So now we're going to try to do this again, and hopefully it works. So for the third and last time, we're talking about an album today that I feel like means a band and an album that means a lot to us personally. Would you consider this to be perhaps the quintessential sludge metal record? I think I could hand this if somebody asked me, "Hey, what's sludge metal?" or perhaps what's Crowbar, the band we're going to be talking about today. I think other records within their discography are my favorite, but I think an album that best represents what came before it and the future might be Oddfellows Rest from 1998. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Sludge metal album, that would be a hard one because that's such a big, broad kind of tree. Yeah. With a lot of different limbs to it. I mean, it's the eyehategods, the acid baths, the goatwhores, the downs, that sort of thing. Whereas, like, I do agree with you. I think you could hand somebody this record and go, this is a good starting point for Crowbar. That's someone that's never heard it. It's got all the ingredients of every era of Crowbar in it that someone can get into. Mm-hmm. And it may actually be a little bit more palatable than the first record, like the self-titled record. Self-titled record's really aggressive.
We didn't talk about it when we were together doing the episode, but what got y'all into Crowbar?
You got me into Crowbar.
Oh, was it me? Am I the fault of all this?
No, it was Swindle.
I'm asking you.
Oh, okay, me. So I saw the videos on Headbangers Ball when they did the reintroduction that Jamie Josta hosted. I saw the video for Dead Sun and I think it's called Slave No More off the Life's Blood for the Downtrodden record. That got me into it. And then seeing a clip from Fuse's Uranium that had Chimera, all the guys in the interview, just like full Crowbar regalia. They must have just saw him at like a festival. And all those dudes at one time going, Crowbar is the heaviest band of all time ever. And just going, okay, like this is it. I'd already had the Down records. So like I was familiar with Kurt and Jimmy from the NOLA record. And what I knew was like, oh, who's this guy that's in this band? Also, who is this guy that I've seen in the Pantera DVDs? Like, who is this dude? Why is he painted green? Why is he tearing shit up in the back of an arena somewhere? Why is he hissing like a cat while he's drinking Greyhounds? Like, I have to know more about this guy.
Austin, did I play Existence's Punishment at a party?
God, you were over. I had just moved down, I think. Like we knew each other, but I had like officially moved to Bowling Green, and I don't remember exactly what it may have been at a party. We were just like in my room for some reason or something like that, and you showed me the self-titled record, and yeah, of course, there's like the classic track Existence's Punishment, and then of course the No Quarter cover, which it might be better than the original.
It is.
So
it is personally to me,
right?
For sure.
So that was kind of like an eye-opening moment, and it kind of in a similar way of like Pantera in a little way. Mm-hmm. Like I've talked about this before, not sure on the podcast, but I always figured like breakdowns were like a bad word when I was growing up, just because of like maybe some of the bands that, just absolutely seem to have like this kind of repetitive thing. All of the breakdowns that these bands did all sounded the same to me. And so when I heard Pantera and then Crowbar even later, I was like, oh, that's what that's supposed to sound like. As a person who didn't really grow up in hardcore, I didn't really have any sort of like footprint with that until I got into those bands and then kind of ran with it from there. So thanks, bud. This is some of the bleakest shit I've ever heard. But maybe we're better for it, I guess.
Being friends with me has its positives and negatives. I'll say that.
This is kind of both, isn't it?
I got a blanket and you show me what
Crowbar
was.
Yes. It's funny because I'm sure, Crowbar's heavy. Like you don't even have the mustard. You just put on a Crowbar record. It's like, oh yeah, duh. It's a Crowbar record. But we'll probably talk a little bit about this, but like the most depressing and like saddened music you could ever listen to, it's like lyrically just completely depressing. And I love it. I mean, there is, my favorite Crowbar record's Life's Blood for the Downtrodden, just because it was my first record I heard. And I re-listened to that yesterday, and hearing the lyrics on there, I think that record was kind of at a point in the band where Kirk was having some real personal issues, like more so than on the rest of the records. And every lyric is basically like, oh man, each song, I'm just in the car openly weeping, but then the heavy riff comes in. It's like, sun's out. It's great.
What's the tweet? There's the,
oh God, something along the lines of like, young people aren't going to understand Crowbar until they've lived a few years and had some heartbreaks or something like that.
Yeah, it hits harder for sure.
When there's been some failure in life, it definitely hits harder.
You definitely get it.
Oh man, you got fired from a job? Here's Crowbar record.
I would say that this is a good record. It's packed full of riffs. I would think that my favorites are probably the self-titled and then Sonic XX in its purest form. Personally, Swindle, do you have a favorite?
Self-titled.
Yeah, it's really heavy. Not to say that this isn't an ass beater of a record, because it definitely is.
Ass beater.
Angry. I mentioned earlier, like, you kind of get the breakdown and the hardcore influence. I think you could certainly see why hardcore kids like a band like Crowbar, but it has everything.
Shung gung 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 ding ding.
There's traditional metal influences. There's classic rock influences. There's so many things that you could really pick out of this record. It's all over the place. But maybe we should get into it a little bit. This is their 5th record. So they put out like 4 records,
Jesus,
all just heavy as shit. And I feel like at a certain point, maybe you, as the heaviest band, maybe you kind of written yourself in the corner. Like, how much heavier could we possibly be? Maybe we should try to add like some sort of dynamics to this a little bit, right?
I know they were just sitting around, and I'm sure Kirk was just coming up with like riffs or however they went into writing the record and initially coming up with these parts. And I'm sure Kirk had been listening to some of those 70s records that he grew up listening to, probably even some of the folk 70s records and stuff. I mean, there's an obvious Dreamweaver cover. I believe that's on the Equilibrium album. So, I mean, there's definitely more than just hard rock and like heavy metal in his background and in his sheath. So he can pull that stuff out. And what you get on this record is a lot of vocal exploration as well. More so definitely than the first records. He's still got some songs on here where he's screaming his fucking head off. Actually, is he actually screaming, or is that just how he sounds? It's probably a blending of both. I'm cool with it. It's like, that just sounds like him. But there's those tuneful vocals, and, this record starts out with this big dramatic kind of harmonized, thick sounding intro. And then it kicks into that, I would say the signature song of not only Crowbar, but sludge in general. Like that's an anthem.
Absolutely. It is the first 2 tracks alone, that intro and then going into Planets Collide is really, it's seamless. And obviously that's purposeful. The intro track actually kind of spawns from the end of the record, but perhaps we'll get there once we get to the end of the album. But Really, really cool kind of guitar layering and kind of atmospheric synth-like quality to the beginning of the record. Definitely some rock and roll kind of classic rock vibes for me. You definitely have like your Thin Lizzy shit with the guitar harmonies. It almost kind of reminded, there's a song called God Gave Rock and Roll to You Too that Kiss did that kind of starts out like that.
There's a second one?
Well, that's what they called that one. It's a cover, but it's like, I don't know if it's just, this is their iteration of it, but that's what it's called. It's called like with Roman numerals at the end. But the lineup too also makes up a good chunk of why this record works so well. Obviously you have Kirk and Todd Strange, who are kind of like, had been mainstays in the band for such a long point at this time. But then you have our good pal, Sammy Duet, on guitar for his first record. And then, he would follow it up on several albums after this, Sonic X in its purest form, and then Equilibrium, which would have come before that. But you could really feel his addition to this record. I don't think he wrote much aside from maybe one main part in a song we'll get to a little later, but
his vibe is felt.
His playing style, you can definitely feel that kind of like black metal vibe on some of this record.
There's definitely an influence on maybe chord choicings, chord patterns, progressions. I would even say there's some influence on some of the, like, just from the acid bath background, probably some of those big, heavy single note kind of riffs that are used in there. Specifically on this record. But his influence is definitely felt on this record pretty well all the way through it with just some of the progressions of that. You can't forget though, you got Jimmy Bower returning.
Yeah, that's right. He was on Broken Glass. But I've read a lot of, articles and interviews. Obviously this record was in the Decibel Magazine Hall of Fame, where he came back on Broken Glass after being in Eyehategod for so long as, their guitar player, and maybe not so confident as far as like, hey, I used to play in this band. I was in this band when Crowbar was called, Slugs, essentially, and Aftershock, and all the different name iterations that this band was. But, he left to pursue other musical endeavors, comes back on Broken Glass. He likes that record, but I think here is where he maybe felt the most confident in his playing. And he does some of the most Jimmy Bower isms on this record that you could probably. There's some crazy shit on this record.
I listened to an interview with him a couple days ago, and he was talking about he left Crowbar because he moved to Atlanta. But like during the interview, he's literally getting a hot dog ready. Like in this interview, like it's like with Revolver, and he's standing up and moving around. Like, what is he doing? He's just getting a hot dog ready. Getting ready to eat a hot dog. I go, perfect. I've seen interviews where he just spits his teeth out in his hand. Like there's a great NOLA. I think it's actually, if you open up the CD booklet in the dead center, there's this great photo of the whole band. He's just got, I think his teeth are out and they're in somebody else's hand.
There's the, you said the NOLA doc. At one point, I think when they first interview him, he's just like fishing. Like he's there, like he cares, but he also doesn't. Like also, kind of doesn't give a shit.
They're
like,
fishing, drinking Mick Ultra, and he's talking to.
I'll do your thing, but you're like, I have a date with a trout or something. Like this is what I'm doing.
God, what a character! What a cast of characters to be in a band like this together. I mean, I don't know if this was the era of the Crowbar videos, which were released on like VHS at one point.
So it would have been before.
Would have been the Broken Glass.
The Broken Glass one would have came out before. And I mean, it showed like them on tour with some of the craziest shit. Like obviously the Pantera tour is covered in that. Paradise Lost, Cathedral. I think while they were recording Broken Glass, perhaps. But yeah, I saw that because of you guys. And like all of the Pantera home videos and all that shit, and like never knew they existed. And some of like the funniest shit from like the Yngwie Malmsteen donuts classic. It's been clip that's been done to death, or this video where it just opens up on Crowbar, like Jimmy and Kirk on the couch with their pud, like on a Coors Light can. Like, what is happening?
I have a feeling that bus was a nightmare to be on at certain points. Like you just walk on the bus and like, I just picture one of the guys underneath the cushions of the front couch or something, and just Pudge is hanging out in between the couch or something. It's like, Jesus.
It's like a Jackass
It's a
skit.
Wednesday.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you walk onto the tour bus and that fucking Minutemen song just jangles on.
It would be like most of those Jackass guys say, like, if they're just sitting, they have their hands cupped on their balls. I feel like you probably have to do that around some of these guys. But they were all very close. I mean, these are guys that have been playing together for a long time in each other's bands, playing shows together.
Yeah.
So the camaraderie is there. You're basically just in a band with some of your best friends, but they also practiced like a fuck ton. Like, these are guys who weren't married probably at the time. They didn't have any kids. They didn't really have any responsibilities outside of, their band. So they really were kind of allowed to practice from that Monday through Friday, probably as long as they would want to go.
Like a band of brothers, man. Like four Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something. Like just a group of turtles.
Just
like,
a group of turtles.
Just a group of turtles.
Who's Raph? Who Raphael?
I believe we discussed this.
Raph.
I believe we discussed
did.
that. That Kirk was Raphael.
Yeah.
Right? Because he likes a good time. Raph likes a good time. Or maybe he's a Leonardo.
I think he would have to be a Leonardo just because
he's the leader of the group.
He's the leader. I think
so.
We talked about this before. I think Leonardo, would have to be Kirk just because. But he was also like a combination of everybody. He likes to have a good time, but he also likes to get the job done.
Jimmy's Michelangelo. Without a doubt. Teeth coming out the whole nine.
Yep.
So Todd.
Sammy is Raph.
Oh, well, absolutely.
Hold on. Is he? Or is Todd Raph because he's the quiet, stoic one?
That's a good question. I think as far as like the angry riffs that we know that Sammy could write.
Yeah. I could see Raph.
Yeah.
As him as Raph. And then, Todd is Donatello, Sexy T as he's been called.
Yeah. What was they had a couple different.
There's great nicknames on this thing.
On this record, he's credited as T God Creep Strange. And Jimmy Bauer is credited as Wicked Cricket.
Sammy's like, oh God.
Sammy Satan.
Yes. It's just straightforward.
We haven't gotten to all the features on the album, but there's one specific nickname in the features.
There are a couple, yeah. So we got Ross Karpelman, also known as Big Ross on keyboards. He was also the keyboardist in the Mystic Crew of Clearlight, which features various members of the New Orleans scene. Sid Montz on additional percussion. He also plays drums on the follow-up record Equilibrium, and also appears on Life's Blood for the Downtrodden. Also appears on Down's Nola from 95. And then on backing vocals.
Here it is.
Big Mike the Testicles. How do you get a name like that?
So I'm going to go back to what we were talking about with the Broken Glass videos. I bet there's some guy that they know that they're like, all right, who's got the biggest sack? And I'm sure he just like dropped those Hanes boxers and what rolled out was a bunch of cantaloupes.
Big Mike's probably a big tennis player, and his shorts are
exactly.
His shorts are a little too short.
Yeah, he really loves Saints football. So testicles aside, as we know, we're kicking into a really heavy fucking record. I mean, God's balls. It's a tad reference, but like got to tie the nuts in there somehow. But we're kicking into a really heavy record, which is funny to say because it's a Crowbar record. It's going to be heavy. There's no doubt ever in that. I've never heard there's not been a Crowbar record I've listened to and went like, this is the alt rock record.
It sounds so big. I think the biggest thing also to note about this record, and we've mentioned this a lot off camera and on camera for our good time. But one thing that gets noted about this record is like how melodic it can be and how, this experimentation with the vocal, and maybe there's some like moments that are kind of scaled back and cleaner, but this record still is heavy as shit. Like you can, from the moment you hear that first track, you can almost like hear the wind kind of being moved by these cabs. Like it is so punchy and heavy.
It's got the Crowbar chords in it, man. Those kind of, it's almost like a bar chord. It just doesn't have all of the higher strings on it. It's just a power chord with the added lower fifth to it. And it just fills up so much fucking space on it.
I mean, the writing would certainly lend to that. And then also, I guess, maybe the production as well. We kind of have a few engineers working on this record. The drums were handled by David Farrell at Ultrasonic Studios in New Orleans. David has also worked with a variety of different people from Kansas, Aaron Neville. He's worked on Crowbar for several. He's worked with Crowbar on several releases, but also mixed NOLA. So maybe that was part of the connection there. But it was mainly recorded at Festival Studios in Kenner, Louisiana, by Keith Falgo, who's not related to Ben of Goatwhore. But he has worked with Acid Bath. He's worked with Abuse. He's worked with Goatwhore and Soylent Green. So
I mean, he's got tie-ins all across the board there. It's almost like, you know, whereas the music scene down there is kind of incestuous. It's a lot of guys playing in different bands. They're all associated. It's almost like the entire music scene is that way. Producers, recording, engineers, that sort of thing. They're all just fans of like all of those guys. And also with New Orleans kind of being this weirdly isolated town, you know, maybe it is just like, hey, this is just who we have in town. Let's stick with them. This is all the labels going to front for us to like do it with. We might as well do it at home and go home and sleep in our own beds.
So we kind of mentioned the first two tracks, the intro, Planets Collide, which is kind of cool. I like that it was almost like front loaded with, I don't know if it was a single, I guess. This was maybe the lead thing. Was there even a single for this record? I have no idea.
I don't think so. There's no video. There's no sort of promotion. Really at this point. I mean, this album came out at a weird time. It came out in 98. You had a lot. That was a weird time for like heavy music in general. So who knows? Yeah.
I mean, I know we'll maybe get into this in a little bit, but there was a lot of different kind of shifting of hands as far as like label and, you know, who was handling the record and the distribution. But yeah, really kind of surprising that I know this song now as a classic Crowbar track, but at the time, you know, but it is kind of neat to see it kind of at the sequence at the very front of the record. And then you have like all of the rest of the album to kind of get into, which again, as I mentioned, you kind of get into Planets Collide, which is definitely different as far as like what they had done before. But then it's kind of like return to form with And Suffer As One, kind of that like one finger kind of bendy riffs that they're so well at doing.
I mean, this is definitely like a template Crowbar track. Like you could go, whereas like we talked about the top of the episode, you can give this album to anybody and go, this is Crowbar. And they can either go backwards or forwards with that and go, yep, it's all there. Every single bit of it's there. This is a track, I think, even against Planets Collide, where you could go, yep, this probably sounds more reminiscent of an earlier era of Crowbar, but still has elements of what's to come. I mean, template Crowbar, it's got those big chords in it. It's got the kind of one note riff. I think this is a drop A song, which Crowbar was, I guess, maybe started using around this time. They started using a drop A tuning on occasion, as opposed to their standard B tuning that they would use. I mean, you brought it up earlier. You can feel the air moving on the track. You can feel the speakers just like pushing that air. Very And Justice for All, kind of just the air moving from those speakers. You know, the fuckers were loud in studio.
Absolutely. I have listened to this album so many times throughout the past couple of weeks, and you know, in different locations. Like I would listen to my headphones and listen to it in the car, but every time it just sounds just as punchy as, you know, didn't matter where I was at. I was still getting the same effect. But yeah, like these first few tracks are kind of like that. They feel kind of reminiscent of maybe like older eras of Crowbar, with the little things added in there, like Thousand Eternal War, you know.
Man, that's one of my favorite tracks on the record. This makes me think of Cathedral, which you mentioned they had toured with, and makes a lot of sense. Very Crowbar is influenced by a litany of bands: Cathedral, Trouble, the first Typo record, Black Sabbath, very obviously.
Like Melvins or something like
Melvins,
that.
Right. But this, when I heard the riffs on this track, I was like, God, this is Cathedral all over it. It sounds like something off Forest of Equilibrium. There's a kind of a Sabbath boogie riff in the middle of it that's really cool. It's got these, you coined this term, the bear and snake vocals that Sammy's layered in right at the beginning of the song. Definitely adds a vibe to that, like this menacing sounding kind of vocal performance in that.
Yeah, it reminds me of like when I heard this song for the first time, I was like, this is what the album cover sounds like.
Yes,
like that
exactly.
kind of vocal thing with all the faces just kind of screaming out. And
the Tony Shalhoub.
Yeah,
photo.
my girlfriend, one of the first dates we ever went on, I think I was wearing the Oddfellows Rush shirt. And she's like, is that a Tony Shalhoub shirt? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like Spy Kids. And in the house, in her house there, because of that, she literally printed out a picture of Tony Shalhoub with all of the different heads and framed it and put it on the wall. So every time I go, I'll share it to you for sure. But I just always think of that.
The end of this song really kind of struck me. I heard the like final chord of the song, and it sounds like the ending of Alice in Chains' Wood. There's a Hendrix chord that's played at the very last bit of that song, and this sounds to be the same chord, just in the key that they're playing in. And it's one of those chords it's probably a major chord, but it fits in with major and minor just with its tonality and the different notes that make it up. But it definitely shows through that their influences are very vast and deep, with, coming from like classic rock records and what would be referred to as dad rock now.
Yeah. The line in this song that stuck with me was, please take me home, carry me home, which is probably what I've said to Swindle many times at the end of the night.
Take me to Astro's grave.
Please take me home, carry me, Swindle. Austin, put your shoes on. We're home now.
Stay out of the street.
The next riff might be my favorite riff on the record.
Oof. Heavy
Carry
track.
the Load. I mean, definitely some Sabbath influence.
Yep.
You kind of have that kind of arpeggiated progression in the song. I love it. I think this is definitely a standout track on the album for me.
There are some vocal effects on this track, I believe. There's like a filter or a phase or something like that.
It sounds like it's breaking up at times.
Yep.
Like it's interesting.
Yeah, you can definitely hear it. But we have to bring up the fact that there's a Sabbath riff towards the end of this track that leads into like kind of a rarity for Crowbar to have this type of breakdown in it. This is a very chromatic sounding breakdown, but it definitely is one of those things that was probably written in the practice studio, and they were just like, oh, this sounds cool. Because Swindle pointed out actually on our way up to the Chicago area was that it sounds like they're missing a beat at one point. And it's just like, oh, this works. Like, let's just play it. And I mean, that whole breakdown makes me think of like In Love There Is No Law era Twitching Tongues. That whole record makes me think of that whole record, just with the pacing and the type of like feel it had to, and the breaks in between the riffs. Definitely a new level of heavy for this band on that track.
Love that bell, ride bell.
Jimmy's got to get it out there.
Ding.
The next song, the Chicagoland area got hit with like a huge couple of storms through here, so I've been like snow blowing and shoveling like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to this record while I was doing it one day, and this song came on, and I was like, it's bleak, I'm sweaty, I'm tired. It was very fitting. December Spawn, which may be the first kind of real sort of, I mean, yes, there's some experimentation with a song like Planets Collide, but I think this is like the real like, whoa, this is really different. This is very noticeably different. Maybe even a ballad, if you could call it that.
But it's also fucking... So like the intro riff is kind of like softer, and then they play the verse riff, and then they do like a palm muted version of the verse riff, and it's like fucking drag your knuckles on the floor heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all pretty much looked at, we see the guys in the band, and we know Kirk has been in the band. Like, this song sounds like him. And somehow this is, not to say Crowbar is the slowest band in the world, because they're not. They generally have some pretty up-tempo fast tracks, but like, this is a slow song by this album standards too. Like, it's like slow, deep, and hard pace. Like, it's slow. And somehow just adds to the weight of the track. Just going that slow. I mean, it's it's another step into kind of that more modern sounding Crowbar style, which has more melodicism and more of this like kind of classic rock vibe that we've been touching on. This next track, It's All in the Gravity, is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
on the album.
Good riff.
Great riff, opens up. Then there's that break, and I think it's Jimmy yelling, doing the count off, which I think is perfect. Which also ties into, I believe, the back half of the song. We get him coming back in on it.
Yeah.
This is Kirk is definitely becoming more of a vocalist on this record. And you hear the melodicism coming out, but you still have these tracks where he's doing this atonal kind of scream that he normally does. This definitely has more of a melodic pitch screaming on it. There's definitely some classic rock influence on this track with some of the effects and some of the interludes and kind of the spacey parts.
There's definitely like some psychedelic moments to this record. I don't know what effect it is exactly, but it's got like this kind of like warbly, delayed part. Definitely very like classic rock sounding type of stuff.
I think the gravity is definitely there's no way it's not a typo reference. There's no way. Kirk was a big fan of that first typo record, basically calling it Carnivore with Keyboards. The man has a typo negative symbol tattooed on the top of his hand. You can't really write doom metal from the States and not have a little bit of influence from maybe those first couple of records from that band. But I think the gravity reference is definitely there for sure, because gravity is kind of described as this weighty, heavy thing. It's a Crowbar record. Reference to gravity makes complete sense.
Yeah. But yeah, then you get those Jimmy Bower-isms with him just kind of, it like the music, aside from the drums, kind of cuts out, and then you just have this man rambling to himself, like playing some beats, and then weirdly, like the music fades back in just for like kind of a brief second, and then it all fades out. Good track for sure.
So Swindle brought up at one point on the trip that he hoped that the whole record had him making ramblings like that, and they just had to mix it out or mix it down. So I hope there's like a rough version of this album somewhere, and he is just rambling with every drum hit.
The thing that adds to this theory is the beginning of On Frozen Ground, when he counts in and like does the quick cymbal hit.
Yeah,
that like blah, 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 that's also there.
Yes, that's right.
I hope they put out like a box set version of this or something. There's just outtakes of him just fucking rambling on or just making weird noises.
I want recorded like video footage of that.
Oh yeah.
Just him in the drum room, just like, and just them all back cackling because they're like, this is a great take. They're just like, what are we going to do about him rambling? Just mix it out. It's fine. Just if it gets in the mix, we'll just say it's this cool thing. It'll be funny.
Give us the lossless files. Give us the fucking master drum files of all the Crowbar songs that Jimmy Bower is playing on.
Yeah, we got to go back to Broken Glass too. I wonder if like,
oh my god, you just hear some. You just I just picture in the studio balls on a snare drum messing with somebody. God. Like
fuck you,
that's where Doback. That's where Brendan Huff and Doback got it from.
Just all the beans. Big Mike the testicles.
There's a lot of fucking testicle talk in this episode.
Hey,
nuts.
How many episodes deep are you? How many episodes have y'all done at this point? And it took this long to just solely talk about genitals.
That's
the
true.
Whole episode.
Have we?
Oh, they're on there somewhere.
So we go from It's All in the Gravity, from the kind of main Sammy Duet contribution to the album, Behind the Black Horizon, which I guess Sammy wrote like the main riff of the song, and then it kind of like sparked some creativity from Kirk to write the kind of flesh out the rest of the song.
Yeah.
But it is kind of just a drone. Like it really just is kind of like really pummeling that riff into your skull.
This track definitely reeks and feels like a Sammy influenced track, even though he may have obviously he wrote the main riff, but Kirk definitely had some chord progression and chord choices in here that made me think of like Dark Throne records, like the first couple Dark Throne records. And just kind of it definitely added a feel to it, right? like an overall vibe. And that's what we talked about with like Sammy's influence on this record. Like he definitely influenced the vibe of this, and some of those chord progressions have kind of become Crowbar templates for later albums. Like it's all over it. This track has a fucking 2-step to it.
I was talking about it when we were all together. The chorus and maybe the bridge of this song have the 1-string riff.
Yes.
Which is all over this album. Lots of 1-string riffs.
There's no way they didn't have the tune after each note played on that single riff because of how low it was tuned. Like these guys weren't using 7 strings or anything like that. These were just like standard scale instruments, and probably whatever strings they could find.
Going into the next song, kind of another ass beater of a track, like just a beat down in this next song, New Man Born. Fun track. I really like this song. It's heavy as hell. But also has some classic rock tinge to it too. There's like fucking cowbell in this, like BOC or like Nazareth or something like that. Just Jimmy Bower hitting the cowbell.
This might be the track on the album that may get overlooked just because it is a straightforward, it's a Crowbar track. Like it's not, it's got cowbell in it, but it's not necessarily as pummeling maybe as the first 5 or 6 tracks. It sits right at the beginning of, I'd say, the last 4 tracks on the album. Maybe that's it. The album isn't necessarily, there's not necessarily a single bad moment on this record, but maybe it does feel a little bit long in some of the pacing on it, and some of the sequencing as well. Maybe if this track was either more so at the tail end of the album, maybe the last couple tracks, or maybe up front, it would get more attention paid to it. But it's still a banger of a fucking track.
Kirk at the end, screaming, "Do it, Jim!" That's always stick around for.
Where are the master tapes? I need the master tape.
Give me those fucking lossless files, goddamn it.
God. Scattered Pieces Lay is the next track. Definitely a self-titled kind of throwback here. Definitely kind of old school reminiscent. I mean, it's got hardcore shit in it. It's got 2 steps in it. There's one of those 1-string riffs in this album that's one of my favorites. And it's basically they're bending each note, but they're adding vibrato to each note, which if you've ever recorded, you're usually spending most of your time tuning. And again, playing at this low of a tuning on these scaled instruments, they're more than likely having to hit a note, tune, or something like that, because getting that take is wild. Just with all that vibrato on those notes is pretty crazy. Swindle pointed out that there's a riff in here too that like you would see people's teeth hitting the fucking floor because it's so heavy. There's like people's teeth getting knocked out.
The bridge riff is heavy enough, and then they double time it. And then they just change to a tom beat. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, somebody's getting their fucking head kicked off.
I mean, spin kicks and whatnot at a Crowbar show would be interesting. I mean, Dying Fetus just played at like FYA Fest. So, I mean, Crowbar playing a bunch of hardcore shows would be perfectly fitting. I definitely got some later era typo vibes on here, a la like World Coming Down, Life is Killing Me with some of the vocal harmonies. Just hearing the layered harmonies made me think of that era typo, which Pete was kind of Pete liked a lot of melody and he liked a lot of harmonies. So it just sounds like that era. And this album came before that era. This album actually came a full year before World Coming Down.
Well, I love the vocal harmonies. It really fills the room out. They feel big and they're kind of ascending almost. Kind of reminded me of like even a Baroness type of thing in a way. I don't know why, but kind of harkens back to that, I guess. But I like this track a lot. And again, maybe this record isn't sequenced the best in certain areas. Coming in from like New Man Born. I kind of like how this end of the record is like laid out. Maybe you guys have different ideas of like if it should flow a different way, but these last 2 tracks I think are great. Going in from like an Oddfellows Rest into the last track, I like how it goes from like a quieter kind of really sparse song, I guess, into just a really ripper. Yeah.
Oddfellows Rest, one of probably the, I would say it's a daring track for this album. This might have been one of the tracks that they were going, I don't know if people are going to like this. It's different. It's not too straightforward. You know, I got Kansas vibes all over this song, like with some of the harmonies. Definitely a very open sounding track. There's not a lot going on it. It's mainly Kirk singing over these like kind of these different guitar parts and everything. But definitely a very, I don't want to, it doesn't feel like it's a passing track or anything. It doesn't feel like filler, but it does feel like it's preparing you for maybe what the last track is, because it is kind of like this dynamically slower, more relaxed song into what becomes, you know, On Frozen Ground.
Yeah. I almost got like there's like I think it's Wherever I Roam, like the Metallica kind of the opening song of that with like some of the effects or the guitar tone on this. It's very open. It's very reverby. The title track kind of being a nod to an actual cemetery in New Orleans that is kind of dedicated to more of the, you know, John Doe, less fortunate, really the unclaimed
Pauper's
people.
graves.
Yeah. So there's a whole cemetery to that. And I guess there was a band called Oddfellows Rest that Kirk was familiar with. And so that name was always in the back of the head. And then, you know, driving around one day, he actually spotted the cemetery with the engraving above the gate. So he just kind of held that title in his back pocket. And thus we have this song and this record. So a really great track. Yeah, to go from kind of a quieter, kind of really experimental track for this band into just really another punch just to end out the song.
This is my favorite track on the album, hands down, just because it comes after those slower ones. And then it's like, here's essentially a 2.5 minute song with a 2.5 minute intro kind of lumped in with it, or an outro lumped in with it. It's fast. It might be the fastest track on the album, actually. You know, I haven't sat down with like, you know, a metronome or anything to figure that out, but it could very well be the fastest track on it. It's got hardcore riffs in it. I actually have in the notes here like Jinko Mosh from like the late 90s and mid 90s. I can just like see all these dudes in like these big fucking pants just like going at it.
Just sounds like a bunch a bunch of chains rattling around.
Man, it's just like the Marley Brothers coming back, you know.
I was just gonna fucking say it sounds like not Great Expectations, Christmas Carol.
Swindle pointed out that there is a pause in this, and Swindle was like, I love a metal pause. And just knowing like, all right, they know what they're doing. But to also add to, like you pointed out, this song almost has a false start, which I think is great. It's almost like, and it may have just been a mistake, and they're like, keep it in. It makes it sound cool, because it does. It kind of adds to the intensity of when it does come in. I mean, there's that. There's also that point at the end of, I believe, the breakdown when the reverb is just soup thick on those drums, and it's like obnoxiously thick on those drums. Like someone was like, hey, Vinnie Paul's been using reverb on his drums for a decade. I want to do that too. And basically, it was just this really rad breakdown with this really like reverbed out thing, which became it's kind of a staple in like more kind of contemporary metal bands now to have that much reverb on their drums during certain breakdowns or anything like that. I mean, fuck, I can't tell you how many bands I've seen live where they just crank the reverb up on the drum, and it's just like there'll be a snare hit in the midst of a breakdown and you can just hear the room the entire time. So like I owe thanks to Crowbar for that.
What kind of soup? What kind of soup? You said it was soup.
Well, if it's New Orleans,
there would be soup.
If it's New Orleans, we definitely know that it's
a gumbo.
Gumbo. Yep.
Perfect. I love it.
There you go.
But as we finish out this gumbo,
big meaty riffs,
big meat riffs, it ends with the intro of the song. Now, which is kind of funny because this is where that intro part originated in this track. They wrote it for the song, but then they were like, hey, why don't we just add it to the beginning without any drums and just do guitars and bass? But I like how it wraps up thematically, basically, kind of like putting a nice little bow on the record, even though it originated right here.
Very Blackened-esque.
This album would clock in probably just under an hour without the bonus track. It's 54 minutes.
Yeah, 54 minutes. This is, I actually went in and looked. This is the longest Crowbar record. There's a couple of them that hit 50 minutes, but this is the longest.
So 12 tracks on the original release of this record. So kind of a little backstory here. This album was originally released on July 7th, 1998 on Mayhem Records. This was their first for the label. They were previously on another label called Pavement Records, which I guess the band was kind of unsatisfied with their relationship at that point. Really maybe a lack of promotion for the band. Not really sure. But Kirk basically had a friend from childhood that worked for Mayhem that had originally gotten their deal with maybe their first label that they were on. Anybody remember the name of that label?
Grindcore Records.
Grindcore Records. He was the one that hooked up that deal. Then he was like, why don't you come to Mayhem? And so doing this release, I don't know at what point Mayhem actually folded, but Kirk's friend started Spitfire Records basically from the ground up. And then so they kind of just jumped ship over there. Yeah. Spitfire would kind of re-release some of the back catalog of Crowbar. But one thing that they did for this kind of Spitfire release of the record, they have a bonus track. They did an Iron Maiden cover from the very first record, the very first Iron Maiden self-titled record, Remember Tomorrow, which if you're familiar with that, it definitely sounds so far removed from what Iron Maiden actually became, but they really knocked it out of the park as far as like a cover. Also very, very psychedelic, kind of like an Oddfellows Rest version of like that song to me.
They do good covers. They cover good.
This band has definitely done good covers on a bunch of their records.
Yeah. We have this one. We have No Quarter, like we mentioned earlier on the self-titled. Dreamweaver, the Gary Wright cover on Equilibrium. There's like a weird also like, isn't there like a hidden like acapella
of Indagata Devita?
Yeah.
Yep. I think that take was probably done the same night that the I Feel the Burning Sun video was probably filmed. The tail end of that video.
They were hanging out at Pat's. Dude, if and when we talk to Sammy, I want to ask about that music video so much.
How much Coors Light was consumed.
Like, what a video in general, where it's just, you know, maybe most videos of this time, it's like some wild backstory, or even maybe like a decade prior, you had like dudes playing and there's like, you know, women all around the band or whatever. This is just dudes bellied up at the bar watching the Saints game. I love that video so much.
That is, I believe you coined the term of like, look how comfortable they are. Just look how comfortable they are in themselves in that video, because it is, I mean, it's a quick video. It's like, what, 3.5 minutes long or something like that. It's just a great.
I bet they got up. You ever been at a bar and you don't realize like how much you've been drinking until you stand up? I bet there was a little bit of, whoa, whoa, no respect. I don't know why that just, I thought that's what you were doing. I don't know. That big danger.
Someone had to be picked up off the floor.
I'm always thinking about Rodney. What's up?
Someone had to be picked up off the floor. I mean, it's without a doubt. I mean, by the end of the take of that video, it was probably daylight when they got there. And they're like, hey, we need a clip of you guys walking into the bar. And they're already like an 18 pack each deep.
Oh yeah, there's no light getting into that bar either. Like time does not exist in Pat's whatsoever. But yeah, great cover. Great covers that this band has done before. So what I want to ask is, you know, how do you feel like this holds up over time? Like, what is truly the legacy of this album? You know, dropping, you know, initially, I think the band was kind of not sure how it would be received. I think going into it, you know, I know there were some stories about Kirk recording some like out of tune scratch guitar to the record and kind of like, I think this may suck. Like this might be dog shit. And then throughout the actual recording process, they were like, okay, I think we're on to something. But now that it is out 1998 and we've had some years, some decades, you know, under our belt with this thing, how do you think this record is kind of, what is its like legacy, you think?
I don't know how any Crowbar fan could not like this album, and kind of like, if you like metal, just in general metal music, like if you like Metallica, the Black Album, like you probably would like this Crowbar record. It's a metal record. There are riffs fucking everywhere. Like the vocals aren't like overtly fucking like he's not like singing his heart out. It's not like fucking Whitney Houston singing or anything like that, but like it's not black metal vocals or hardcore vocals or anything like that. Like it's tuneful. It's probably not the easiest vocals to get into, but they're not terribly off-putting. But riffs everywhere. I don't know how they could have been like afraid of this album being bad, because it's a consistent album from minute 1 to fucking minute 55 or whatever.
You know, it's the 90s were a little bit different with maybe what was accepted in the heavy music genre, because everyone was still very much like, you can't mix these two things. You can't mix certain things in the genre. And it is wild to think that they were second guessing an album like this, because it may have 8 minutes overall of like highly experimental parts on it in the 54-minute running time. But I mean, in comparison to maybe the albums that came before it, I could see where those guys would go, oh man, this might be a little too soft, which is a funny thing to say, because come on, it's not like, as you said, you're not listening to, a Simon and Garfunkel record, or you're not listening to a Whitney Houston album or whatever was contemporary that was, of that ilk. I mean, in 1998, you had albums released by Rob Zombie, Hellbelly Deluxe. You had Korn's Follow the Leader that came out that year. You had Metallica's Garage Inc. that came out that year. And then you had like an underground album by Nile, Amongst the Catacombs of the Nephron Ka. And that album is far less, acceptable. That's not the word I'm looking for. Hold on. Far less excessive than this album. Whereas, you could put this on with like a Motorhead record, right? This would hit the same wave as like a Motorhead album. You know what you're going to get. It's a Crowbar record. Motorhead probably experimented a little bit, as we know they did with like when we did our 1916 episode. There were some ballads on there and it fit right in, and maybe it was, they had released 4 albums before. They're like, this is our 5th record. How is it going to be received? How are we going to fare? How's it going to sell? At this point in time, you had to worry about album sales. What type of touring are we going to do? What's our fan base going to think? Or are they just going to shit on it and go, it's a sellout record? Carcass was getting sellout calls for Heartwork when it came out. So I get it. And that record sounds like a death metal record, like no bones about it. So hearing these guys go, it doesn't sound like Broken Glass. It doesn't sound like Self-Titled. What do we do? Like, are people going to hate this? And luckily, with the type of album we ended up getting, like, it has stood the test of time. I believe the band went out and played 25th anniversary shows for it last year at this point. I would say they probably play Planets Collide every single night, anytime they play, because if it's not ending the set, it's right before the last song, which is probably All I Had. This is a classic metal record. I don't see the only thing I could see is that since it did come out in the 90s, it's kind of a hidden gem, right? You still got to dig deep into the underground to find this record. This isn't like an immediate upfront album, which someone's probably going to hand to you.
No, but I would, like, kind of how we alluded earlier, if someone did eventually get here, like, when I first got into heavy music, this wasn't like the first album that was given to me, but, digging a little deeper, this is something that you're definitely going to at least stumble upon at some point.
Absolutely.
If you get into this band's catalog at any point in time, this sets the pace for everything that came after it. If you hear a Crowbar record now, it sounds more akin to this than anything that came before it. Although those records are amazing too, and still are among my favorite in the discography as well. So I would say this is definitely a huge landmark record for this band, not only because the songs are great, but it really kind of sets the course going forward. One other thing I wanted to touch on too, before we kind of close the chapter on this, the touring that happened. We had some festivals that were played, some tours.
Mm-hmm.
I found a shirt on T-shirt. Is it T-shirt Slayer or Killer?
That's
whatever
it.
the hell that
That's
record,
it.
like
T-shirt
that thing
Slayer.
is. I found an old shirt from this era called Nolan's Swamp Tour 1998, but I couldn't find
great title.
I couldn't find any sort of details on like what actually occurred, like how many dates that was, who was on it. I would assume that maybe they played with some of their friends, like maybe they tacked on eyehategod to something like this. I would think that maybe that is the case because they have been playing with some of their fellow members of the scene. If you go to Milwaukee Metal Fest, I want to say there was some New Orleans bands on this, but Milwaukee Metal Fest 1998, they played with some other great bands at the time. Hatebreed, Meshuggah was on it, 6 Feet Under, Emperor, Sodom, Destruction. We also had the World Series of Metal, which was a festival or maybe like a day in Cleveland, Ohio, where Crowbar played with Brutal Truth. Maybe on some other days you had like Cannibal Corpse, Nile. Then one really standout couple of shows, the Titans of the Underground at CBGB's in New York City, which like a 2-day set of shows, $10 a pop. You had Buzz Oven, Crowbar, Grief, Soylent Green, Brutal Truth, Today is the Day, and then eyehategod, which, so I saw the flyer for this on Facebook, and some people were commenting that Kirk and Sammy actually filled in maybe for some vocal duties on the eyehategod set that day. I don't know what happened there, but
there's video
of
clip of that for sure.
Is there really?
I've seen the video clips of Sammy in particular singing for eyehategod. It's pretty wild shit to like see that because like Mike Williams has a pretty recognizable voice for that band. I mean, that is a pretty ratchety sounding voice, but to hear like Kirk singing some of those songs, like Kirk singing Sister Fucker or something, would just be like obnoxiously great to see.
Yeah. And then I guess in Europe, they also toured with Bolt Thrower as well.
That's a fitting fucking tour.
That would have been awesome to see.
That is a fitting tour. Hey, who tunes lower? Like that kind of thing. Like that is a fitting fucking tour.
A battle of riffs.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, hey, if we're kind of, if you're going to be duking it up against Bolt Thrower, I would say that Oddfellows Rest is certainly an album to contend with. Basically the music embodiment of the Big Montana. Sorry, I've been watching Saving Silverman too many times this week.
So, it's
what's on the Big Montana again? I don't even remember. Is it just
slabs of meat,
mounds of roast beef?
When Steve Zahn had that sandwich in his hand, it took up the entirety of his hand. It's the reverse. Dude. It's like the reverse of Andre the Giant grabbing a real beer can.
When you ate meat, did you ever eat at Arby's?
Oh, when I was a kid, I ate there all the time.
Oh yeah, what would you? Get?
Yeah. Did like a beef and cheddar, or every so often I'd get like the French dip with the au jus.
I don't think I've ever gotten a French dip there.
I've literally never thought about this ever in my life, but like for food commercials, they have like we talked about alligator fluffers before, but they have a food fluffer for food commercials.
Hell yeah.
Did they have a food fluffer for Arby's on fucking site for Saving Silverman?
Oh, dude, yeah.
They
sure, never look like that shit, though.
I'm sure that there was someone on that set that was like, all right, we have Neil Diamond's like assistant, and right under that in credits was like food fluffer.
Arby's fluffer.
I'm certain.
I loved how it like looked the best that I've ever seen. I don't really fuck with Arby's. Like I like their curly fries, all right, but I probably haven't been there in years. And that was probably the best I'd ever seen a sandwich look from there in that that movie. Because usually those things are fucking like smashed down.
When I would unwrap that foil, it would come in. It was like the top was slid over, the cheese was hanging off the side. I was like, why am I eating this? And I continued to eat it.
Yeah, right.
It's like, you're going to eat it. You paid $6.99 for that sandwich because it was expensive even back then. Like, you're going to buy this thing. I do, getting us away from the big Montana. You guys have heard me jokingly say this over the last week or so, but if it's not from New Orleans, it's not sludge. It can be adjacent. It can be stoner. It can be doom. It can be death doom. It can be all that. But if it's from unless it's from Louisiana in particular, it's not sludge. I'm sorry. Like, there are some great bands that do stuff that sounds just like this. But if you're from California, or you're from, you're from Seattle or Oregon, if you're from the East Coast, wherever, if you're from somewhere in the Midwest, like, awesome, great. I'm going to listen to that shit and still enjoy it. But if it's not from Louisiana, it's not sludge. I've always kind of considered Crowbar as part of like the Peaceville. It's like Crowbar being from New Orleans is like our version of the Peaceville Big Three, which was Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, and I believe Amorphous or Anathema. It's one of those two. And like, they had their own sound. They were from the same area, whereas like sludge kind of has its own sound. It's from New Orleans. And you could probably say the defining sludge bands would be like Crowbar, Eyehategod. I'm going to say Down at a certain point. I'm sure that would be interchangeable for any of us, of like the third one we could throw in there. And in a modern sound, there's really nobody doing it better than Thou. There's really not many modern sludge bands from Louisiana,
and they're their own thing too. And
yeah,
like
100%.
And which again is kind of the thing we maybe started the episode out saying, is that like maybe it's hard to place this as the quintessential sludge record because all of the bands sound so different.
Yes.
And when I listen to Thou, it is very much like a sludge kind of like doom band, but man, they have their own thing going. Like, although they do, I would say that they use feedback just as well as like an Eyehategod, like a 6 or how many people they got in the band now. So it's like an 8th instrument or something. Yeah. But yeah, they there's a lot of cool shit going down south for sure.
And us kind of tying together this kind of 3-part series we had on like the influence of like Sammy Duet on these albums. Like, you can definitely, he may not necessarily get the credit right out the gate because Crowbar is Kirk's band. We know that. But I don't think you get some of the newer Crowbar styled records without Sammy's input, however much it may have been on this record. The chord progressions, you don't get the influence he had on maybe Kirk's writing for later periods. And it just shows how much of a quintessential role he's had in like the whole not necessarily the New Orleans sound, but the Louisiana sound with like Acid Bath, 2 albums, extremely different sounding band, but definitely influenced a lot of shit. Goatwhore still going at it hard, still releasing records, still contemporary sounding while having roots in the old school. And then his influence and his, continuous ties with Crowbar. I think every so often if they play Louisiana and like they're playing tracks from this album, Sammy will actually jump on with them and play a couple tracks from the album with the guys. So hopefully with us going through these albums the last few weeks, hopefully you can go in and listen to, some stuff from Sammy's catalog a little bit more. Maybe listen to those Acid Bath records, both of them. They're both completely different from the other, but they're great records. Listen to anything from Goatwhore. You're not going to miss it. You're going to love, if you like one Goatwhore record, you're going to like them all. And listen to his Crowbar output. I mean, Oddfellows Rest, you've got Equilibrium, you've got Sonic Excess in its purest forms. And that's your favorite record, isn't it?
Easily that or self-titled. But I would say as far as like Sammy's records, I would say that's probably my favorite. The Lasting Dose. Yeah. To Build a Mountain.
Oh my God.
What are we talking about? Like, what are we doing?
Hopefully Sammy starts getting a lot of like the attention he does deserve with these records that are coming, or these records that have came out and that he's been on, because I do feel he's kind of the hidden guy in that scene. We have our big names. We have our Jimmy Bowers, our Kirks, our Phil Anselmos, our Pepper Keenans. But Sammy doesn't really get brought up enough, and I do believe he needs it.
We've reached that point of the episode where we like to share some recommendations, some things we've been listening to as of late. I have a few this week. The latest I Flies single, Bananarchy Zoo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right because that's the way I'm going to do it. But this is a noise rock trio from Philly. Definitely reminiscent of some amphetamine reptile stuff. The vocalist just straight up sounds like Buzz Osborne, like from the Melvins on this thing. It is so sludgy, just so aggressive. It's like the riff, incredible. It's like pummeling just over and over again. We've been playing it a lot on the live show, but it has current and former members of Backslider in this band. I think it's Kevin Bernstein, the bassist, is also in a band called Triac. Triac. It's like a grindcore band. He's also, I think he also does some like production work over at Developing Nations, which is a studio that has done stuff for Full of Hell, Jarhead Fertilizer. They also make like the guitars with the big thick like aluminum necks as well that sound so great. I think I've seen Spencer from Full of Hell use a few of those, but this is coming off of a self-titled record that will be dropping next week, January 26th on Thrill Jockey. This is a Chicago label, so I love the tie-in. There's also another Chicago tie-in to I want to say it's the drummer of Tortoise, which is a Chicago band. Did the album artwork for it as well, but great single. There's another one out, Sleep Forever. Band's going to be hitting up the East Coast in early February, maybe late January. So if they're coming through, definitely check them out. We also have Noel. This is a Tennessee-based funeral grind band.
Jesus, what a heavy band!
Oh, so great!
Jesus Christ!
I feel like maybe this band initially kind of got unfairly lumped in as sounding maybe like a Full of Hell clone.
Yeah.
But the shit that I heard on the last record, Metempiric, as well as this, all the singles we've been
completely
getting from
different.
This, it's awesome. They are truly. It's clear that this is like they're their own thing.
Yeah, this is a very dissonant sounding band.
So we've gotten like 3 singles so far. They just released their latest single, Portrait, which is out now. It's going to be coming off of their 3rd full-length record, As Spoken, which is independent. It's going to be independently released. Also dropping next week on the 26th. There's also another track called Unto Viewing, and then the title track. And there's been like visual elements for each single that's been released. Very kind of they're almost like grainy. It's like definitely shot on film. I think they're all directed by the vocalist of this band, but very abstract, kind of dreamlike, very ghoulish, ghostly imagery. Very cool stuff. They're almost like ghoulish. They're all like mini films almost. The latest one for the Portrait single kind of reminded me of that Skinamarink movie that we watched last year for the Halloween thing. But it was cool. Like I loved it. The movie, not so much. I don't know however y'all feel about that, but the video definitely worked for me. The band has been known to tour. They toured very hard in 2023. They were everywhere. And 2024 kind of shaping up to be not much different. They're going to be hitting North America. They got a big North American tour coming up February through March with some support from Thantafaxeth. Again, I hope I pronounced that right. Nightmare as well. The upcoming record, As Spoken, as well as tour dates, can be found on untoviewing.com. And my last recommendation, my non-heavy release, Sheer Mag. This is a Philly-based rock band. Some of the funnest, most creative guitar stuff I've heard in a long time. I've been a fan of this band for a few years. I want to say they were like maybe friends with the Power Trip folks. I definitely have seen them in kind of like hardcore and some metal circles, but the guitar playing on this, it's like harmonies and solos and riffs. It's like rock, but it's also funky and it's melodic and it's just very tastefully done. The vocals are amazing. Their upcoming record, Playing Favorites, is going to be out March 1st. Their latest single, Moonstruck, is kind of like a country funk type of song. But then you go to like the single that came up before it, like All Lined Up, sounds like a disco track. The title track is also available. It's like 70s rock. All of them have music videos. They just signed to Third Man Records, which they've been signing a lot of really interesting bands. They signed Snooper from Nashville. They signed Hotline TNT. So I've kind of had an eye on that. Like before, I feel like Third Man definitely kind of sounded like, I feel like all this shit they would sign sounded like, Jack White, White Stripes type of shit. But a lot of the bands they've been kind of signing as of late and putting out stuff from, I've been a big fan of. So anyway, Sheer Mag going to be embarking on a huge North American tour in 2024, the end of March through May. So if they're coming through your area, I would highly recommend that. That's all I got this week.
I got a lot. So I want to start off with, I've kind of been catching up on some records from 2023 I missed. First off would be Necrophire, Burning Shadows in the Southern Night. They're going to be on the upcoming Decibel Metal Tour. Great record, definitely in the vein of like Bathory, that era of like black metal, really cool sounding shit. Also an EP from kind of a death thrash band called Sacrificer, called Life After Death. Definitely modern sounding death thrash. Like the vocals are definitely more death metal adjacent, but it's really fast, just kind of like technical thrash shit. Mother of Graves, which just signed to Profound Lore Records. This is their 2022 release. It's called Where the Shadows Adorn. Really cool death doom. I don't necessarily know where they're from, but like this is some really rad shit. I also want to, touch on Vitriol's newest release that will be coming out on January 26th. The album is called Suffer and Become. They released what I'm assuming is the final single for the album, called Shame and Its Afterbirth. It's the first track on the record, and this thing's going to be something to reckon with. And I'm hoping I get to go to the Chaos and Carnage tour this year because they'll be one of the opening acts on it.
Oh man,
that thing is going to be intense.
Cattle Decapitation, Carnifex,
Rivers of Nile.
Yep.
There's a couple other bands I'm missing for sure. But Vitriol is definitely one of the opening acts on that. So that is going to be a great tour to go see.
And you finally got a date. You got a date in Nashville.
I finally got a date in Nashville.
Dad's got a date. They're playing here, but it's like, it blew my mind because you would think a band, like a tour like that would go through the city. They're going to be out in like West Chicago, where like very close to where I like go to school and shit. I was like, oh, what the fuck is it? Like,
that's an easy drive for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it's not snowing, I guess.
The newest release from a band called Guiltless that has Sasha Dunable in it. I think the release is called Thorns. It's going to be an EP coming out on Neurot Recordings. That's some really cool shit. It's definitely post-metal-esque with kind of its own vibe to it. That's all I've got for this week.
And I got 3 singles. The first single is I Felt a Funeral by Big Brave. They're blessing us again this year with a full length called Chaos of Flowers. It's going to be released April 19th on Thrill Jockey Records. The second, there's a video and a single. The second single, Stuck in a Dream, which is the second single off of the forthcoming Gouge Away record, Deep Sage.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. It's going to be out on March 15th from Death Wish Records. I think they recorded a video this past weekend when they premiered the video for Stuck in a Dream. So I guess they'll have another video coming out soon.
That's cool. It's been so long. It's been like 6 years since they put out like a
long
right?
player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they had the single that's also going to be on this record that came out like last year, but I'm like, yeah, I've been ready. I've been a good boy. I'm ready for some more Gouge Away for sure.
Yeah. And my third single is Waxahachie. I sent that song to Austin. The song is called Right Back to It. It's featuring MJ Linderman.
Hell yeah.
It's from her upcoming album Tiger's Blood, which is out March 22nd on the Anti label, which is the label Tom Waits shit's on, right?
Oh, it's an offshoot of Epitaph.
They did they did some Deaf Heaven shit.
They sure did.
They do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a subsidiary of Epitaph Records.
That is what Tom Waits shit comes out on, though, right? Anti.
Yes, you're correct. Yep.
Yeah.
I like that label. I like a lot of shit that comes from them. And when you sent me that, I'm stoked. I love MJ Lenderman. He's in a band called Wednesday, but he also has some solo stuff that's really great. Kind of like sounds like Neil Young kind of shit. Very, very good. And he's been like guesting on a lot of shit. as well. Like not just the Waxahachie stuff. He was on a record last year from an artist called Squirrel Flower that's kind of based in the Chicago area. Definitely some cool guitar shit. All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. This was a really fun kind of 3-part series on Sammy Duet. We'll have maybe some interesting things in the future. Stay tuned for that. But you can always follow us at Distortion891, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can always listen to this show on Spotify and Apple Music. Comment below. What do you want us to talk about? Is there a riff that you think we've been slacking on that we should be doing more deep dives on? Is there a band you'd like to see us do a deep dive on? We want to hear from you. We'll be back next week talking more about the riffs for Swindle, for the Dillbozer, for me. You've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll see you next week. Bye.